Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take a stack of complex sources and try to deliver the knowledge you need fast and deeply. And today, we are opening up a conversation about something that's, well, it's pervasive, but it's often completely unseen. We're talking about emotional and psychological abuse. And this isn't just about, harsh words. It's about a chronic, subtle pattern of control that kind of operates like an invisible cage. It slowly erodes a person's identity until they really don't recognize themselves anymore. We looked at this case study of a woman named Layla. She's 30 years old, and she described her partner as, calm, responsible at first. But over time, that calm environment, it morphed into one that was just defined by restriction.
Control.
Yeah, control over her clothes, who she saw he would belittle her successes at work. And she was left feeling this just overwhelming guilt for making simple, independent choices.
And that insidious, gradual shift is exactly what we're here to unpack. It's where that emotional warmth gets replaced by puppet strings. So our mission today is to move past all that confusion and give you some clear, synthesized tools. We're going to identify exactly what emotional abuse is, how to recognize the subtle signs of these controlling strings, whether in others or, maybe in yourself, and then map out the concrete, actionable steps to break free and to start healing.
Okay, so let's start with the core definition. Our sources are very, very clear on this. Emotional abuse is basically any persistent behavior that's aimed at controlling, intimidating, weakening,
Humiliating,
or manipulating another person's feelings and their thoughts.
And what's really critical there is the word persistent. These are chronic, frequent, and often indirect actions. This is not a one-off argument. It's a consistent pattern, a pattern that fundamentally restructures the victim's reality.
And here's a point from the research that really stopped me. The damage inflicted can be equal to, and often greater than physical violence.
Because the injury is internal. It undermines a person's entire sense of self-worth.
That's a profound point. So if the damage is that severe, but the actions are indirect, we need to know exactly what they look like. And it's not limited to romantic relationships. Right?
No, not at all. You see this dynamic everywhere. In families, friendships, even in the workplace. The mechanism of control just adapts. So if we break down the different categories of manipulation that, form this invisible cage, it becomes a lot clearer.
Okay, so where do we start?
Let's start with verbal abuse. And it's not just shouting. The subtlety is what's fascinating here. It's things like derogatory labels, destructive criticism, and probably the most frequent one, insults that are hidden inside jokes.
I was just getting defensive.
Exactly. The abuser delivers the insult, and then when the victim reacts, they're told, "You're too sensitive," so it turns the victim's own legitimate emotional response against them.
Weaponizing a normal interaction.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. What about when the communication just stops? The silent treatment.
That's silence-based abuse. And it is one of the most effective tools for generating anxiety. Prolonged silences, deliberately ignoring someone's presence, or withholding affection as a direct punishment.
So it cuts off that basic human need for security and validation.
Completely. And it leaves the victim desperate to earn back favor no matter what it costs them.
And today, we see this control manifesting in other ways too. Financially, digitally.
Absolutely.
Our data highlighted economic abuse. So that's controlling all the money, denying access to it, making someone account for every single penny.
Or even preventing them from working. All to maintain that absolute financial dependency. It's about pulling the purse strings, literally.
And tied directly to that is the digital side.
Oh, digital abuse is huge now. This is that compulsive demand for passwords, the constant oversight of online activity, monitoring messages, calls.
Restricting their entire virtual space.
Yes, it's an incredibly effective way to enforce total isolation, even when you can't be physically present.
And all of this really falls under the larger umbrella of psychological abuse, which is, it's about manipulating someone's inner world.
Right, through things like gaslighting, creating guilt out of thin air, emotional threats, just fostering this deep mental insecurity.
So once that structure of the cage is built, how does the abuser actually, tune the key and keep the victim trapped?
Well, we see these really consistent, identifiable features of control.
And the most fundamental one seems to be hidden control. The abuser systematically and very subtly seizes all the major decisions. They restrict the victim's freedoms, their achievements, their entire life path.
And that's often reinforced by belittling. Using language that's just designed to destroy self-confidence. Phrases like, "you don't understand," or "you just lack the ability," and the ultimate threat that's always sort of hanging in the air, "without me, you'd be ruined."
Right. And this is where gaslighting comes in as the foundational psychological weapon. It's the mechanism they use to question the victim's perception, their memory,
Yeah.
driving this acute self-doubt about their own sanity. The classic line, I never said that. You're imagining things.
You're just being too sensitive. And it's so potent because if you start trusting your own memory, you are forced to rely solely on the abuser's version of reality.
And the way to ensure that reliance is through dependency and isolation.
Exactly.
The abuser systematically separates the victim from any external support, friends, family, anyone. And they position themselves as the only source of affection and security.
And once that person is isolated, they're vulnerable to indirect threats. Things like warning of abandonment, hinting at infidelity.
Or threatening to cut off financial or emotional support, it just cements that fear.
So if that's what the abuser is doing, how does this constant psychological pressure show up in the person who's, well, living inside that bubble of control?
Yeah.
What are the signs we can see in the victim?
Well, the internal damage is just immense.
Yeah.
Self-esteem plummets, often to nothing, and they develop this chronic anxiety, a constant, pervasive worry.
And the guilt.
The guilt, yes, a persistent, baseless feeling of guilt for everything. And this overwhelming sense of worthlessness.
And behaviorally, what changes?
You see excessive people-pleasing, a deep, profound fear of making any decision on their own, and of course, complete withdrawal from friends and family.
But the most tragic finding in our sources, it's what they call the blind spot. Despite all this suffering, the victim often fails to label these actions as abuse.
They normalize it.
They normalize it. They think, this is just how intense relationships are, or this is my fault.
And that brings us to the paradox. This is where we need to really slow down and be empathetic. Because the question from outsiders is always, why don't they just leave? But what the sources show is that the abuse itself forges the chains that keep the person there.
That's exactly right. But before we get to why victims stay, let's look at the psychological roots of the abuser's behavior. Because what's fascinating is that the motivation often isn't just pure malice, it's coming from a place of profound insecurity.
So, like, what does that mean?
Well, if you connect it to attachment theory, abusers often have what are called insecure attachment styles. They deeply fear rejection or abandonment. And they use this rigid, control, emotional, financial, whatever, as a defense mechanism against that fear of loss. They aren't always consciously trying to destroy you. They're trying to manage their own pain by making sure you can never leave them.
And these behaviors are often learned patterns, right? Things they saw in their own childhood.
Yes, repeating dynamics they observed growing up, maybe parents who controlled through humiliation or neglect. But, and this is a vital caveat, while research shows that many abusers were prior victims, that prior victimization never justifies their current abusive actions.
Understanding the root is for clinical insight, not for an excuse.
Precisely.
Okay, so now back to the victim. It is so easy to judge from the outside, but why is leaving so incredibly difficult when the pain is so clear?
Well, the answer lies in that manufactured dependency. The abuser has spent years, sometimes decades, conditioning the victim to believe they are incapable of surviving alone, so the abuser becomes the only perceived refuge, even from the pain they themselves are causing.
And that's coupled with hope, right? That little bit of hope.
Yes, the belief that the behavior will get better, especially during those honeymoon phases where the abuser might shower them with affection, which just resets the whole abusive cycle.
And then there are the external pressures, shame and fear.
Fear of what people will think, especially in a long-term marriage, or just sheer terror of retaliation if they try to leave.
But the core internal issue is that completely eroded confidence. When your self-esteem has been so systematically destroyed, you genuinely start to believe that you don't deserve any better.
Or that you simply lack the ability to start over. It's a total loss of identity.
And if this pattern continues, the long-term consequences are, they're severe.
Severe depression, anxiety, the development of emotional traumas that look a lot like PTSD, and chronic low self-esteem that can plague any future relationships.
So the journey out isn't just walking away. It's a massive psychological reconstruction project.
It really is.
But the good news, drawn from all our research, is that recovery and freedom are absolutely possible.
Oh.
And the initial steps involve taking the knowledge we've just talked about and turning it into assertive action.
Okay.
So the very first step is to externalize it. You have to identify and name the behavior. Actually write down specific instances of gaslighting or punitive silence or humiliation.
Why is writing it down so important?
Because naming these actions reduces their mysterious power. It confirms that this is an objective pattern, not just, a misunderstanding, or something you're imagining.
Once it's named, you have to establish healthy boundaries. This means defining and then consistently maintaining clear personal rights, like I have the right to my own opinions, or I have the right to see my friends. And the crucial one, I have the right to say no without fear or consequence.
Mhm.
And that's where you start to push back against the control.
Exactly. And at the same time, you have to start the internal work to rebuild self-esteem. Our sources recommend logging your successes, focusing on your strengths, doing things that actively remind you of the person you were before the abuse started.
And this is where professional therapy really becomes invaluable.
It's non-negotiable for lasting recovery.
Uh-huh.
We saw several therapies listed. CBT helps challenge distorted thoughts. EMDR is often used to process the trauma memories themselves.
And there's also ACT, which helps victims reconnect with their own values, and schema therapy, which addresses those deep-rooted patterns.
But even before therapy, there's a crucial step. You have to reconnect with safe contacts.
Break the ice.
Break the isolation the abuser enforced. Reaching out to trusted friends, family, or counselors gives you perspective and essential support.
And for people in highly controlling situations, you must craft a safe exit plan. This is tactical. Securing your own finances, finding a safe place to go, getting legal advice if necessary.
Yeah.
And we have to address one really important FAQ here: couples counseling.
Yeah, Nas.
Experts agree it usually harms the victim. It can put them at even greater risk because the abuser can use the sessions to learn new vulnerabilities or to plan retaliation.
Individual therapy has to come first, always.
Always. And to prevent falling back into these patterns in the future, our sources emphasize being vigilant for red flags in new relationships. Things like extreme jealousy, excessive judgment, sudden disproportionate anger. The best defense is maintaining your boundaries and your financial and personal independence from the very start. And to help you start reclaiming your agency right away, our sources provided a great tactical tool: the 7-Day Challenge. I like this. It's designed to give you a quick burst of power and self-belief. It starts very small. Day 1, write down just one controlling behavior and the feeling it caused you.
Set one small boundary. It could be as simple as, today I'm choosing what we watch on TV.
Practice one assertive sentence you've been avoiding, and by day 7, you review the effect of those small actions.
The goal is just to start small, to feel that sense of power return, one snap chain at a time. So, to synthesize our deep dive today, emotional abuse operates in the shadows, but its impact is physically and mentally devastating. Your path to freedom, it begins with cultivating clear awareness, strengthening your boundaries, and seeking trauma-informed help. And you have to internalize this core truth. The problem is not the victim. The unhealthy, controlling behavior belongs entirely to the abuser. Recovery is a journey, for sure, but freedom is absolutely possible.
It is so essential to internalize that message. You are worthy of respect and safety. And remember that powerful insight from our material. You deserve love that builds you up, not one that breaks you down. So we'll leave you with this final thought and a challenge. If you identify just one abusive behavior in your life today, what will be the single, small, assertive first step you take to reclaim your power? Think about that first step and start there. Thank you for diving deep with us.